All right, ladies and gentlemen, today I have with you Greg Rogers. Greg is one of my good buddies, recently retired. Super proud of him for that after a long career in fire service. And so a little bit of stuff on Greg. He started off with North Metro in Broomfield, Colorado. Back years ago, did 3 years there, was in South Kitsap for 17 years working in fire prevention. And then in 2015 moved to Spokane Valley, where he served both as a division and a deputy chief. Got his bachelor's degree in engineering technology, fire protection and safety, master's degree in leadership and management. Some of the teams and places that Greg has served: Washington State Fire Service Leadership Forum, as a president of the Washington State Association of Fire Marshals. He's currently the chair of the International Association of Fire Chiefs and Life Safety section. In the past, he was the commissioner for the Commission on Professional Credentialing for the Center of Public Safety Excellence. That's a big one, man. That's a lot of words. And also served as Washington Youth Soccer Association board. I know Greg as both a national and international kind of guru around the idea of fire prevention. And we were talking about it even before the call started. He's kind of like, I don't know about guru, but everybody else around you, Greg, is just amazed. And not only fire prevention, but I guess the thing that I always heard about you before I met you was your ability to form relationships and your deep concern and compassion for people in the fire service. And so one of the things I would say to you before I give you a chance to introduce yourself is I absolutely love you. You have one of the sweetest spirits of anyone I know. And sometimes when you say someone has a very sweet, kind of gentle, kind spirit, that means they're not a good leader. In your case, it's great because you're this incredible leader who has this tremendous humility and meekness about you. And I love that about you because, you know, I'd stack you up against almost any leader I've ever met in my life and say, hey, Greg's going to have a voice. You're actually going to have integrity. You're going to have something to say and it's going to make a difference. And yet none of that comes from a place of arrogance. And so I absolutely have loved getting to know you and think that you're an incredible human being. So tell us a little bit about yourself. So just a couple minutes. Who's Greg? What's your life like? Married, kids, all that good stuff.
Oh, wow. Well, I've been, the lady I married was a lady that I met right out of high school. I think we've been together 34, 35 years.
Nice.
She was I will tell you this much, she's a very strong-willed lady. I had to ask her to marry me 3 times and she turned me down. And she told me she wasn't going to marry me until I got out of college. So I knew I at least had somebody with a smart head on her and knew what she wanted, knew where she wanted to go.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing is I think my parents and her parents both knew we were going to fly the coop. We're originally from Oklahoma. All of our family is in Oklahoma. And how we ended up out here in Washington State, I still have no idea to this day. It just kind of pieces of the puzzle all fell together, and it was an interesting process. How we got here. I have 2 wonderful kids that I'm blessed with. I tell people every day I'm not quite sure how I ended up with 2 kids like I have. They are 2 awesome kids. I have an older daughter that will be turning 22 this summer, and I have a son that is graduating high school this year.
Awesome.
And wants to go on to civil engineering. But I can tell you this much: they have definitely put up with a lot of angst from me and a lot of stress from my part. When I get stressful, I get a little aggravated. So they put up with a lot, and I can tell you, I'm blessed to have all 3 of them in my life, and blessed to have my family. And it's been an interesting ride.
Yeah, good. Well, so you recently retired, but you're also a consultant currently. So tell us just a little bit about that transition. Like, what are you doing now?
So I'm actually doing community risk assessments.
Okay.
And I do community risk assessments as part of the consulting firm when we work with organizations to do what they call a standard to cover and community risk assessment, or if they do a master plan and it includes a community risk assessment. I also do some code stuff with them, which I think I shared with you. I think it was a couple of weeks ago when we were on a call that I had a project that I did with the Carolina Panthers to do a fire life safety analysis. So It gives me an opportunity to do a wide range of projects, and opportunities to be able to stay connected with the fire service. And it also gives me an opportunity to make a little bit more of an impact than it is locally. And I think that's one of the things I've always looked at throughout my career, is how can I make a bigger impact, not just in my community, but as a holistic picture.
That's awesome. Before we jump into some of the base questions that I've got, if somebody's listening to this, right, and they're like, "Man, what is Greg great at? Where can he serve? Where are the areas that you're hoping to serve in your retirement that you're like, man, I would love to do these things with these type organizations." What do those look like for you?
To me, I've always had a passion around and love to help organizations develop and grow and foster their fire prevention areas.
Yeah.
I think it's one of I will say 25 years ago, 24 years ago, when I got into the prevention field, everybody would tell you it was for the sick, lame, and lazy. It's not that way anymore. It's a professional thing. I think the other thing is I love code development. And that has always been one of my biggest passions, of being involved in the codes and making an impact in anybody's community, anywhere, any kind of help or assistance that I can give anybody. I've always been willing to do it and absolutely willing to help.
Yeah, I love that
And
too, because I think on some of that stuff, instead of an organization going, we're starting from scratch, they work with a guy like you and they're starting from all the experience and the knowledge you've got. So it can be a quicker process, right?
right, right. And I think that's one of the things that impacted me the most when I came to Spokane Valley Fire Department, is because when I interviewed with the chief, he's like, if you have the opportunity to come here, you're going to be starting with a clean slate. And you're going to be able to create what you want. And I was like, I literally walked out of there and I'm like, okay, I got to pinch myself. Is this really, I'm like, this would be like a dream world. I don't know if it's really true or not,
Yeah.
but
No, that's awesome. So tell me about a couple of the things that you've learned being in fire service, either about fire service, about life, about organizations. I mean, what are a couple of the big lessons that you've taken away after a career working in that industry?
um, I would say one of the things about the fire service is we're not shy to share stuff
Yeah.
with other people and other organizations. And I think that's one of the things that's really great about the fire service. But I also think it's one of the things that we don't take enough advantage of,
Okay.
because I think too many times there's a lot of organizations, a lot of people, and a lot of departments that um, get into their vacuum or their their world,
Right.
and this is all they see. They don't see everything else that's going on, what other organizations are doing or what other departments are doing, um, and utilize that to their best advantage.
Yeah.
I think one of the and it was interesting. I learned this from a guy in Oregon. A guy from Oregon, he went around to like 4 or 5 different states, and he was interviewing different people, and he would come for the day and he would just interview you and talk about processes and everything you were doing. And he went back and he created that in his own department. And I was like, what a genius idea. And I tried to foster a little bit of that when I got here at Spokane Valley, because I would a couple of new hires that we would have, I would send them to other organizations, like our community risk reduction specialist I sent to Tucson. And literally we paid for her to go to Tucson, and she did like a 3-day ride along with a bunch of different folks that they had to learn more about their programs. We sent some folks to Tualatin Valley to learn about their apartment program. I sent folks, I think she went to Wilmington, North Carolina. I can't remember. She either went out there or she went to Virginia, but went to a couple of different places, just so that way we could learn from them and figure out, it was like, okay, now bring it back and figure out how we can implement that in our community.
I love that stuff. When I was a pastor, we used to do that, and we would do it with other churches, but oftentimes we would send our teams to things outside of our industry. So, we'd send them to, I remember one church that I talked to sent their entire greeting staff to a NBA team and said, hey, we want you to walk through their hospitality process. And what's really cool about when you do things like that is all those obstacles that you think nothing can remove those. You go somewhere else and they've removed them. And then you go, wait a minute, how'd you do that? Or you see something that you just never have considered before and you go, oh man, we can do that. So I love that as a leadership principle. Take your team, send them to other places. Don't just talk about it. Let them experience it. Let them have questions. Let them come back and go, hey, why are we not doing this? Or why couldn't we do this differently? I think that's a brilliant thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think it also gives your team and your members an opportunity to think out of the box.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in all honesty, I think we could do it from, I think in the fire service, that could be done way more than what it's currently being done.
Yeah.
It could be done from captains, it could be done from BCs, it could be, and it's interesting. I always thought about it when I moved to South Kitsap, because when I went to South Kitsap, they were always complaining about the number of construction projects they had and the plan reviews and all of this. And, you get into that vacuum and you think, oh my God, we go on this many calls and we do this and we do that. And it's like, if you have an opportunity to go and see another organization that is busier than that and see how they actually function, it's like, holy cow, okay. The other thing is I think it also lets you appreciate a little bit more what you got.
Yeah.
Because you have an opportunity to see what others have. And it's like, holy cow, we've got da 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 da, and you start sharing that with people. And it's like, look, I'm not trying to brag, but and sometimes, and it's interesting, a lot of times when I hear people talk about that, I stay very quiet.
Yeah.
And just try to listen, because I don't want to say what we have, because it might be better than what they have. And they're on cloud nine because they actually have it. And it's like, look, I just need to be quiet and let them be proud of what they got. And I need to walk away. Because
it's really cool to that cross-pollination. I remember we were on a call with some of the other chiefs across the country, and one guy brought up something, hey, we're doing this. And somebody else was like, oh, we thought about that, but we haven't. Somebody else said, oh, we have already finished that. And the collaboration was really cool. And you could see people kind of learning from each other. I thought it was great. What about like personally? Is there anything throughout your career that you've like, hey, this is what I learned about myself, or this is what I learned about leadership through that whole process of all those years serving?
In all honesty, I probably learned more from my kids than I did.
Yeah.
And I relate that to my leadership style, because I think everybody, and I've used that as an example, because I can talk to my daughter in about one topic in one way, and if I talk to my son about that in the same way, he takes it differently, because he looks at the world completely differently. She looks at the world.
Let's press into that just a little bit, right? Because among the fire service and law enforcement, as guys go on into the command staff, a lot of them kind of feel like they lose their family. They lose connection with their wife. They lose connection with their kids. I've sat with a ton of chiefs who were like, well, I lost my kids. And I'm like, hey, whatever's lost is redeemable. But talk to me about what you've done through your career to stay connected to your kids, because I'm always amazed, right? When someone in their 50s, their kids like them and they like text them or call them, or my kids call me and text me daily. Like today, one of the jokes was my son texted me a video. He's like, hey, look at this video of my dog. And I'm like, awesome. Happened to be his dog pooping. So he thought it was funny to send it to me and trick me, and I was like, but what have you done that's kept you, that has built that relationship so that you're not one of the guys going, hey, my career cost me my family? Like, what did you do to protect that?
So I think one of the things I did is I try to find out what they're passionate in and try to get involved in that. That's one of the reasons why I got involved with Washington State Youth Soccer Program, and became a board member. And it was interesting because my daughter lived, eat, and breathe soccer. She lived it 24 hours a day, and that was something that she was passionate about. So two of the things that I said to myself was, one, I was going to try my hardest not to miss any of her events or her games. And two, I wanted to get involved in it. One, so I could know as much as I could know about it to take her to whatever level she wanted to do or play, and give her as many of the opportunities. You know, I've had the opportunity to do that somewhat with my son in regards to teaching him about tools, woodwork, and some stuff just about how to work with your hands, what to do, you know, where are the tools in the toolbox, so that way you know where to put them back in the right spot, as well as, you know, what can you do, what are you capable of doing. The nice thing is because he's interested in engineering, you know, I also have a opportunity to talk to him about that since I got my bachelor's degree in engineering technology. And so
That's cool.
it's
What I hear you saying is that idea that instead of just saying, "Hey, I'll work the overtime and make the money to give them the stuff," you're with them. You're going, "Hey, I'm actually gonna learn," and I love this too, right? Like you're a student of your child. Well,
yep,
what do you love? And there's this philosophy among raising your kids. Like you can either tell them which way to go, or you can help them figure out which way they ought to go, and you can kind of walk with them in that. And I hear you talking about, I didn't try and buy stuff to make them happy. I basically went, "Hey, which way do you need to go? How can I walk with you in it?" And I love that. I
right,
think it's great counsel for anyone in
yep,
any industry that's trying to parent well is be a student of your child,
yep,
and then instead of providing stuff for them, just be
right.
with
So I think the other thing is I always tried to include them in my, and as well as my wife, in all of my community stuff, whether it was community stuff with the fire department, community stuff with the Rotary Club that I'm, you know, part of. With, we do a pancake breakfast here in Liberty Lake, which I'm part of their Rotary Club, and they put me in charge of the kitchen. So I brought my son into the kitchen. He helps us cook pancakes and eggs and different stuff. And my wife and daughter actually help take the food from the kitchen out to the serving line and back and forth. And it's funny, our Rotary Club, the first time I brought the entire family to come and help at the breakfast, Rotary breakfast, and it's for vets. It's Memorial Day when we do it, and we give the vets breakfast for free. And everybody in our Rotary Club was just shocked that I brought my whole family.
awesome. I love
And
it.
I'm like, how do you? I'm like, you know, I wouldn't see it in. That's the only way I knew it and saw it.
Right. But
Um,
there's a lot of guys who their responsibilities, they let them take them away from the family instead of
right.
going, which responsibilities can I bring my family with me to? I think
Yep.
that's
Yep. No, and I've taken my son to fire stuff. I've taken my daughter to fire stuff that, you know, and it's funny, they moan and groan constantly as we go. Even when they were younger, they moaned and groaned even more. It's funny, as they got in high school and they needed the volunteer time, then they would come and ask me for what, hey, when is this coming up? When can we go do this? So it's kind of funny to watch the transition of a moan and groan about it. But to me, my wife and I, we always just kind of went with the flow. If they moaned and groaned, we still, it's like, yeah, just ignore it, keep going on. And
yeah.
by the time it was over, it's like, hey, didn't you have fun at the open house for the fire department? And they're like, yeah, it actually was kind of cool.
That's good. Same thing you do with firefighters, right? You just put up with the moaning and groaning and go
Yep.
see
Oh
who's
yeah.
done the
Yep.
job.
Yep. Yep.
So talk to me about within the fire service, what do you think we're excelling at, and where do you think we need attention? Like when you think about the fire service as a whole.
Fire service as a whole, one of the things I think we excel at more than, and honest to God, it's more than anything else, is service.
Yeah.
You know, I look at it this way: if there were companies out there that could get their employees to provide the level of service that we do in our industry, that company would be worth $1 billion.
So how do you do that? I mean, press into that a little bit, right? Because some people might say, well, to be a firefighter, you got to be altruistic and you're willing to risk your life, and that's not going to happen in the, for-profit sector. But I don't think that's true. I mean,
Nope,
what
nope.
has been true in the fire service that's transferable?
I think one of the things that's transferable is if you talk to most firefighters, they know they're here to serve the community and they know they're here to serve you. And
Yeah,
that's one of the things they're passionate about. I think it also has to do with the passion of their job.
yeah,
I don't think there's anybody well, I don't want to say there's anybody, because there's people out there that don't like their jobs.
sure.
Um, but for the most part, I think the people in our industry really like their jobs. They love being able to serve people. And I think from the beginning of day one, we've been told that we show up during people's worst times in their life and we try to make it better.
Yeah.
And
And
I
I think
think,
that's a leadership thing too,
yep,
though. I mean,
yep,
I think what's natural to you and what's natural to fire service, that stuff comes from the top down, right? Like I
yep,
think some organizations were like, well, we're going to force this customer mindset from the bottom up, and it
yep,
never works. It really is like when the chief believes it, when the deputy believes it, when the
yep,
battalion chief believes it, it's easier for the firefighter to believe it. But if you start at the firefighter level, it dies out. It just doesn't
right,
have. So
right,
in my mind, it's men like you, Sean, Will, those people who are
yep,
serving in such a way that they prove it up top so that everyone looking up goes, oh, that's who we are, not going, well, I don't want to be that. I'm being told to be something else.
right, right. Well, and I also think it happens, um, because I wouldn't just say necessarily at the top, but you got that mid-level too,
Yeah,
that rowing
absolutely.
in the same direction.
And the
Because,
mid-level may legitimately organizationally be the most important in that,
oh,
because it's easy to try and force it down.
yep,
Maybe people below going, hey, I'm trying to reach up, but that middle
yep,
level is really the maintainers of your culture.
yep,
Like I always think leaders create culture, and the base kind of frontline workers are the ones that carry it out. But you're right, in the middle leadership, the middle management, they're going to be the ones that go, hey, yes, that's an authentic thing, and this is how we put legs to it. And so they are critical in that process. I absolutely agree
yep.
with you.
Well, and I think even with that mission, it comes down to, you can have firefighters in the same station that are irritated with each other and hate each other.
Right.
But it's as soon as it becomes mission critical and that bell goes off and you need to go provide that service, they don't even think about what they were just talking about or arguing about or any of that. It's, hey,
Right.
we're here to do a job. And it's like, boom, they just click, it's on autopilot, and here they go.
It'd be interesting
But
in some of our organizations to create that. What is the mission and
yep,
what are the tones? And
yep,
use that terminology in, auto manufacturing, or use that
yep,
in retail to go, we got to know our mission so clearly. And I think the mission has to be so important. And I do think any mission can be that important. You can work in a car place if you understand exactly what you're doing, then it
right,
makes sense. I think
right,
sometimes we have these weak mission statements, it's like, oh, we're here to make money and profit, and people are like, whatever. But I think you figure out, hey, there was one organization, and their thing was like, hey, we're making sure that single moms have a car to get home in, and it's like, well,
yep,
that matters way more than me fussing because I didn't get my car in time. Like
yep,
figuring out the right way to articulate the mission and make it matter is huge.
yep. Well, and I think the other thing with the fire service is that mid-level that we're talking about, most organizations try not to develop too many policies because they don't want to handcuff
Right.
those individuals to make the best decision that they can in regards to how they serve the community or how we serve what I call our customers.
Yeah.
And I think in the public service, we do ourselves a lot of disjustice. And I heard it from a gentleman, Lee Cockerell, with Creating Disney Magic. And he talked about a restaurant where they always kept the door open, and the table, a couple of tables that were close to that door, the people that set up those tables were always cold. They would ask the manager to close the door, and he would say, no, it's our policy to keep it open. And it's like, what's in the best interest of the customer? It's like, hey, let's close the door because it's a little cold outside right now, and keep the customer warm and happy. But his thought process is hey, this is our policy, we can't do it.
Right.
And so
Which
it's
is always
interesting.
funny. When I think of policy, right, I always think, one, what's better than a policy is a value. And
Right.
two, the only reason the policy is there is because somebody did something stupid. And
It's
now we're like,
true.
it never happened again. And I think, well, let's teach values. Let's
Yeah.
teach it, because I think, like, use the restaurant example. I go, why is the door open? Like, don't tell me that it's just policy. Let's talk about why. Because if it's a customer based thing, okay, we can close it for the sake of the customer. If
Right.
there's a hierarchy thing, then we know that and say, oh, well, this is why we do what we do. So values are way better than
Yeah.
SOPs.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So, and what about anything that you think needs adjusting? Anything large scale that you're like, yeah, I think in the fire industry, this is something we'd be wise to kind of address or tackle?
I think the only thing, I wouldn't say we necessarily need to address it, but something that we need to keep our eyes on is uh the but literally the fire service as we know it today in 5 to 10 years is not going to be the same.
Right.
And And I honestly believe if we don't start changing and start looking towards that future, it's going to come to a critical mass, and I would hate to see what's going to
So
happen.
flesh that out a little bit. What do you see those changes being? I don't disagree with you, but I'd love to hear kind of what do you mean it's changing?
Well, I think it's going to be the what the community's demanding of us versus the money that we're going to be getting.
Okay.
And I think it's going to be one of the things is we throughout probably the last 2 decades, the fire service has said, yeah, we'll take that on. Yeah, we'll take that on. Yeah, we'll take that on. Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, we'll do that. And I think we're going to reach a point where we have to start saying no. And I think when we get to that point and we have to say the no, it's going to cause some waves and ripples throughout our community, because we're going to reach a critical mass where we're not going to be able to continue to respond to everything. There's major cities out there right now that are experiencing it, and I think there's going to be some major issues. I think there's also going to be some major issues that we're on the verge of seeing with volunteer departments and combination departments. I would say 5 to 10, somewhere between 5 and 10 years ago, there were some volunteer departments that said, "Hey, we're not going to do any interior attack. We're going to do it all from the exterior." And I think you're going to start seeing more and more of that. I think the preemptive cancer issue with firefighters is going to start to become a bigger deal. I think it's going to start to become a bigger deal of putting firefighters within risky situations that we've done for 20 years. That it's going to be I honestly believe it's going to be a cultural change.
Yeah. And when you say that, what I hear is we're going to have to get really good about our hierarchy of priorities. Like which
Yep.
ones do we have to say yes to? Which ones, if we have time and space, do we say yes to? And which ones do we just say, hey, that's we can't do that? And it is interesting because organizationally, when you've said yes so much for so often, yes, yes,
Yep.
yes, yes, yes. When you really get to the place of who you are is when you have to begin to say no. But
Right.
and you have to have a reason. No to this because of that. I think organizationally, that's where a lot of us struggle is we don't have our hierarchy in order. So then a no just feels kind of random.
Right.
Well, no, why? Well,
Right.
because you can't. Can't isn't
Right.
an answer. Like, tell me no. Well, because to do this means I don't have a response time that's as effective as it needs to be. And I
Right.
do think we're gonna have to come clean on some of our reasons. Like, hey, why is this a no? No is an appropriate answer. I think it's one our culture's forgotten because no seems like such a mean answer. And I'm thinking, no protects your yes. And
Yep.
so getting really good about our yes, so our no's are actually really healthy can be really
Yep.
important. So
Yeah, I think the other thing that's going to change that is going to be technology, and I think that's going to be from the AI, artificial intelligence.
yeah,
I can guarantee you're seeing it right now with what do they call that? The GPT talk, where you can ask it a question and it'll write like a paper
yeah, yeah.
for you out of a. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable, off the hook, and I've kind of messed around with it, but when you start thinking about artificial intelligence, I can tell you you're going to start talking about artificial intelligence when it becomes with deployment models throughout
Yeah.
departments and
And when
organizations.
you say artificial intelligence as a fire service, you're not saying law enforcement. You're
No, 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 no,
you're not talking
no,
about them having artificial intelligence. You're saying
no.
the whole. Okay, I got you. I
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
make
yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest agencies and departments that I know that's using it is New York. New York uses artificial intelligence right now to figure out which areas, which buildings, which occupancies they want to go inspect. And they utilize the artificial intelligence in regards to where power outages been, where are bills not being paid, where's this. And they have literally done it and seen it where that artificial intelligence allows them to know this is where our next potential fire or hazard's going to come from. We need to respond there and try to take care of it. I think that's going to be one of the other biggest pieces in regards to technology that fire departments and communities start taking over. I'll give you a perfect example. I just watched a video of Western fire chiefs. They're now doing drive-by assessments after wildland fires and can come up with a dollar loss
Really?
within hours or days after the incident occurs, and they don't have to physically send people to the property. And what they do is they use and everybody's seen it, Google Street View.
Hmm.
They use Google Street View along with the assessed value and something else, and they use very similar cars that Google do to drive through the wildfire area, look at the damage. The computer, the automated system can look at that, realize what was there, what wasn't, how much loss was there, and can calculate up a whole loss. So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about in regards to artificial intelligence that's going to start making our job a little bit more easier. I think the hard part is going to be our industry embracing that.
Right. Adaptation.
Because we walk around and talk about 100 years of tradition, and it's like, hey, we're going to have to start leaving a little bit of that behind, because it's the thing about it is, what you have to realize, we came from horse and buggies, and we weren't really started at horse and buggies. We were started by people running
Yeah.
little
Bucket brigades.
machine to another little place, and bucket brigades and all of this, and then we went to horse brigades and steam engines and da 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 da. And
So let
look
me
at,
ask you a question there before we jump into another one. Like, what within first responders, fire, EMS, law enforcement, one of the things I've noticed, so working with those different guys, having them in my life, is there's a certain change resistance, right? Like new technology comes in and new data comes in. Like, I think when I hear about AI, I'm like, man, the data points are phenomenal to me. What is that change resistance? Where does that originate?
honestly, I don't think it's just the fire service. I think it's everywhere.
Okay.
Just it's our natural being. We're just,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, who moved your cheese? I mean, that didn't come from the fire service.
That's true.
That was it. And I think it's the same way. And the thing about it is, we even talked at one point, if you get like 40 to 60% of the people to
Yeah.
embrace that change, you're doing awesome, because you got those latecomers, you got those people that
Right.
are newly adopters, you got this.
So within fire service, when you're bringing change, what are some of the things that are important as a deputy chief, as a fire prevention person? What are some of the elements that you go, hey, this is what I pay attention to make change more acceptable or more
Yep.
ready for people? What do you
Yep.
do?
I think one, you kind of got to take the temperature of the water and see if you think the organization is ready for that change.
Yeah.
And I'll use this as an example. The changes that I created here in Spokane Valley, I could not have done in South Kitsap.
Okay.
I went back to South Kitsap and taught a community risk assessment, or taught a community risk reduction class for their up and coming officers. And they were so stoked about some of the stuff I was talking about. And this was 5 years after I was gone. And they were like, why haven't we been doing this? And I'm like, look, 7, 8 years ago, I can tell you, we weren't ready for this, because I was here in this organization and here's where we were at, da, 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 da. And I said, now this is where you're at today. And you're saying we should have been doing this for the last 5 years. Yeah, but the organization wasn't ready at that time. The organization is ready for you to be able to make that change now.
Yeah. I love where you're talking about honoring the organization enough to figure out where it's at, not just demanding it goes to the new place and going, hey, you're not ready for this, but you're already ready for that. There's an author named Todd Bolsinger, and he's got a couple books out. One's called Canoeing the Mountains, and he talks about the Lewis and Clark adventure. And one of the things that was fascinating, he said, anytime you're bringing about change, you have to figure out where you currently are on the map. And I know as a young leader, all I would think about is where we wanted to go. And I'm like, we got to go and we got to get there. And I had all this urgency and it would kind of freak my people out. And I realized it's because, you have to figure out, like, are you at the beginning of the trail? Because if you're not, that's okay. Figure out your first step is to get to the trailhead. Where what I would do as a young leader is I would just be like, hey, we get over the mountain tomorrow. And they're like, we're not even sure what a mountain is, And so I love that idea of like honoring the organization to go, where are we? Where are we in relation to where we want to go? What's our next step? And our next step may not be everything. It may just be the thing that gets us ready for the next thing. So that's really cool to hear.
Right. I think the other thing with that change is you have to let the organization take it at its own pace.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important. The other thing that a mentor instilled in me in one of the conversations that we had long time ago was, he said there's going to be points where you're trying to move the needle and you're trying to move that change, and he says you can't get too far ahead of everybody else. Just
Right.
because you understand where you want to go, kind of like that trail you're talking about, just because you know where you want to go and you know what you're capable of doing, you have to bring everybody else along with you. So he
Yeah.
says you might have to take it at a little slower pace, because you need to go back there and you need to bring this person up to where you are today, so then that way we can continue to move
Yeah.
it forward.
Well, one of the greatest lessons I ever learned came about in my marriage when we were hiking. So I'm one of those guys that's like drive, drive, go, 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 and love all that stuff. And we used to go hiking, my wife and I would get on the trail and I would think we got to get to the top so we could get to the bottom. And I would just be playing. She's behind me, like, 3 miles back, screaming, like, what are you doing? So we had a frank conversation one day and she's like, hey, is this about you getting to the top or is this about us hiking together? And I'm
Right.
like, well, I guess it's both. And she goes, okay, well, then we have to work something out. And our negotiation was, hey, she would tell me, Mike, you can go a little ahead. Just remember that we're doing this together. And so lead me, and get to the top and all that stuff. We'll have a great time. But if you leave me instead of lead me, you're no longer leading me. And so
Right.
we negotiated out to where it's like, hey, I don't go as fast as I want. She goes faster than she wanted to. And then we get to see some really cool summits together. And I think that way, organizationally, right, is that idea of like, yeah, we're going to have to push at times because our organization may not always go at the speed it needs to. But the minute we lose visual distance, and it's like, now we're getting to the top. And I do think sometimes for those of us that are driven leaders, what are you trying to get to the top for? Well, so I can get to the
Right.
bottom. Okay,
Right.
well, there's no, you're going up so you can go
Right.
down, and so knowing your why can be really important as well.
Yep. Yep. Well, and I think it's probably the same thing your brother's experienced. You go to a different department,
Yeah.
you've seen it somewhere else, you know it works, you know how
Oh,
to
yeah.
do it, you know all of this. So, hey, let's implement it here. Ready, set, go. Let's do it. And then the next thing you know, it's like, why is this taking a year and a half to implement? I don't
Right.
understand. I'm like, I'm going to start pulling my hair out. And it's like, whoa, stop. Don't pull your hair out. It's just like, you need to give them an opportunity to get to where your previous organization was. So that way you're there.
Yeah.
I think one of the best things is the current chief at South Kitsap, when he was a captain, we sent him out to a community risk reduction course at the NFA that was for chief officers. And he came back, and it was funny. He came back, he looked at me square in the face and he goes, Greg, I've seen the future, but we're not ready for it here.
Oh,
And I
wow.
said, Jeff, I said, that's the reason why I sent you, because I said, I knew you would be able to go, hey, I've just seen the future. And trust me, I know we're not ready for it here, but I said, at some point, some way, I know you're going to be that catalyst.
Yeah.
And he's the one that's now the fire chief that had me come over and teach the chief officers about community risk
That's cool.
reduction. So it was kind of interesting to see that full circle come about.
Yeah. Well, let's switch a little bit. I want to, while we still have time in the call, I want to talk about some personal, kind of like how it was for you in the fire service. And then I want to talk a little bit about the chief's role, both for audience in general, but also for people that are coming up through the ranks going, what do I need to expect? So first on the personal side, what was challenging for you in the fire service? What did it cost you to be in the fire service, right? Because all our industries cost us different things. What were some of those costs for you that you had to address, you had to face, that you had to grow through?
I think one being what we talked about early on, family.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, I think I had a good mentor that helped me with that. He had gone through a lot of painstaking stuff with his family. So I think when we started our family, he helped guide me in some certain directions to make sure that I kept that a balance.
Did you go
Um,
get that mentor or did he find you? I'm always interested in mentoring because I think it's powerful.
Say
How,
that again.
how did your mentoring relationship come about? Did you go find one? Did somebody come and say, hey, I'm going to mentor you? Did it just happen organically? What was that like for you, the mentoring piece specifically?
I would just think it happened kind of organically.
Okay.
It wasn't he sought me or I sought him. He was my supervisor when I came to South Kitsap, and I think it just kind of fostered from there.
Yeah. What
Um,
do you say to a young firefighter, maybe starting to move up, right? He's an engineer, maybe he's a lieutenant, whatever the rank structure is in their department, who goes, hey, I don't have a mentor, but I want one. You're now in this phase of life, right? Like you've got wisdom, you've got the gray hair, you've got the experience. What would you say to them if they want a mentor? What are some things they can do? Is it just, hey, shucks, no one ever invested in me? Or what can they do?
no, I go and find somebody. Go and find somebody, whether, and I would encourage them to go and find somebody that's not, um, their immediate supervisor at their station.
Yeah.
You can have them as a mentor, somebody that you look up to,
Right.
but go and find somebody either outside the organization or somebody else internally in the organization that kind of has the same, and I don't want to say the same character traits as you, but somebody that you want to inspire to,
Yeah.
excuse me, inspire to be.
Yeah. The other one that comes to mind for me that anytime I think about mentoring is go after someone that's busy to be your mentor. I think sometimes we look and go, well, they're too busy. Well, that's who you want mentoring you, right? You don't
Yep.
want the guy that's like, yeah, I got a ton of time. I'd love to
Oh,
mentor you. You're like, I
yeah.
don't want that guy. And
Yep.
so, like, I always think in terms of like, a good mentor is probably only going to mentor a couple people because he's
Yep.
way too busy. She's way too busy doing it. But go for that person. Ask
Yep.
that person to mentor you.
Yep. Well, and just like you said, if that person's too busy and they already have a couple of people, they're going to tell you.
Right. And they may even
But
have a referral for you.
yeah, I was getting ready to say they're going to tell you who would go get in touch with, and
Right.
I'd be listening to them before I'd be listening to somebody else.
Right.
But I think the other important thing is you need to have somebody outside your circle,
Yeah.
because you need to have somebody that you can share with.
Yeah.
Somebody that's
What
inside your circle, and you share stuff with them, it may come back to haunt you.
Yeah, one of the things that I find among firefighters and cops is this closed circuit living. It's like all my, everyone that has any influence in my life comes from my circle. So, my mentors in the fire service and my friends are in the fire service and my this or in law enforcement. And the effectiveness of opening the circuit and going, listen, you don't have to be mentored by someone in your industry. I think oftentimes it's, hey, go get mentored by someone that knows nothing about your industry, but who knows everything about the thing that you want to be really, really good at. And then go, hey, teach me that, because sometimes that takes the edge off, right? Like,
Right.
like I oftentimes think my son's a cop. I work with cops as a chaplain all the time. And I think, man, if they could hear an outside perspective, it would change their world. And I see that among the fire as well. And so I think with mentoring, coaching, that kind of stuff is broaden your view and go, hey, maybe he knows nothing about fire service, but that doesn't mean he doesn't know anything about life balance, finance,
Yep.
physical health.
Yep.
So sometimes
Yep.
that can be really, really good. So let's see, what else do we have in there? How about relationships? Like going off of that, how did you foster relationships along your career? Because like what I know about you is you're very healthy relationally. Like we've had all kinds of conversations in different size groups, and like you're not intimidated by it, you're not overbearing, like you have this really like good presence about you. How did you do that in an industry that's go 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 go, and sometimes it's very kind of like ah rah, like, how did you build the relationship part of your career in life?
I honestly, I think the relationship piece for me just became, it's natural.
Okay.
It's something that was very natural to me, and I learned very early on, after I got out of college, that I could accomplish stuff. I could accomplish a lot more through relationships, than I could with anything else. And what I mean by relationships is it didn't matter who, what, when, where, or what you were. I don't care if you're a chef at a restaurant. I want to get to know you. I want to know who you are. I want to know what you're about. I want to know what your expertise is as a chef, because I guarantee you in the next 7 days, I'm going to run across somebody that's going to ask me a question about that. And I'm going to be able to go, hey, I know somebody that can answer that for you, and here's who it is.
Yeah.
And it was funny because one of the division chiefs, when I first started here at Spokane Valley, he used to joke with me and he used to call me the connector.
Yeah.
Because it didn't matter if it was EMS, it didn't matter if it was ops, it didn't matter if it was this. I could go, hey, I know somebody you need to get a hold of, that
Right.
can help you with that situation. And here's their name, here's their information.
It's interesting because my experience with you has been that goes beyond the tactical part, which I think is great, to your value of human beings, your value of like, no, when I see that person, for me, like the encounters I've had with you, you genuinely are interested in the individual. You
Yep.
know,
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh, I see value in
Yep.
you. There's something there, and which I love because in the fire service, it's got to be amazing when you go on a call and you see the human, not just the thing that needs
Yep.
done. That had to serve you so well throughout your career.
Well, and I would say when I was on the operation side, I probably, now that I look back at it, I can see it, but I didn't realize it when it was
Yeah,
happening because we would go to an incident or something medically and somebody would just gravitate towards me.
yeah,
And it was, and I'm just like, and they would all laugh and they would just, and it could be some homeless dude and he would just gravitate towards me. And it's like, why do I keep attracting these people? I'm like, I'm not even trying to. And it would happen naturally. And now when I look back on that, I think it's what you say. It's part of my demeanor.
right.
It's part of my approach. But the other thing is it's funny to me, even as I've gone on throughout my career, I learned really quickly that I could meet you and I could remember the last vacation that you told me about. I could remember what your kids were doing because you told me. I might not have a clue what your name is, but I can carry on a conversation with you about your entire family and walk away and still not even have mentioned your name. And you would
Yeah,
think, man, I can't believe he remembered all of that about me.
yeah.
And I think one of the other things that impacted me the most is when I was a college student, I had the opportunity to work at the Phoenix Fire Department. And I got to sit down with Brunacini for a couple of hours and just ask him, kind of the same questions we're going over here right now. Did he have any regrets? Would he change anything throughout his career? This and that. And literally, I think it was a year and a half later, he was coming to teach at a Fire Rescue International in Dallas, and which is like 2.5, 3 hours from Oklahoma City. And I was like, hey, I sent him an email and said, hey, I know you're doing this presentation. Can I come and sit in your presentation? And he emailed me, remembered my name, said, yeah, I'll save you a seat. Don't worry about it. Let me know if you can't get in. By the way, if you want to bring some of your college buddies with you, we can get them in.
Oh, that's cool.
Literally showed up at the conference, watched him teach the class, waited until the entire session was over. Everybody else was out of the room because we didn't want to bother him. Went up to the front of the room and he literally immediately called me by name. And I was like, to this day, I will never forget that because it was so respectful
Yeah,
of somebody of that caliber. I mean, this was Chief Brunacini we were talking about. This was 30 years ago.
yeah.
So
When I
it
love
was,
too, right? Like it didn't, and this is what I think about it, didn't cost him anything to
nope.
give you that much value,
Yep.
right? I mean, he gave you away. I mean, to this day, you're talking about it, you're like, man, this profoundly impacted me. Didn't cost him much, but he was willing to pay that price.
Yep, absolutely. And to me, that's something that I honestly and truly want to kind of pay it forward.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. So let's talk chief role. What was one of the biggest surprises for you when you go from, the floor to now you're in operations, now you're in a chief role? What were some of the things that surprised you about the transition from, tactical firefighter to kind of more the command staff roles?
I think if I can think about it, there's three things, and three things, and a couple of them people that I mentored shared with me, and I was like, yeah, no, God. But I will tell you, as I got further and deeper into it, I was like, holy cow, I can't believe it. One of them I would say is it's very lonely at the top.
Yeah,
And that's one of the things I didn't truly wanted to believe because I wanted to say it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't matter what you believe or what you think. It's lonely at the top, and that's one of the reasons why I say you need to have somebody outside your circle to go and talk to.
yeah,
Number two would be um, you have to it's amazing to me how much you have to watch your verbal and written communication.
Yeah.
I mean, you can just it's unbelievable because you can just make one comment and it can be fully destructive. And
And I
it
would
blows
extend that
my
out
mind
to
away.
even your physical communication, because I know as a
Yep.
leader that, a sigh at the wrong time, kind of an
Yep.
eye roll at the wrong
Oh yeah.
time could
Oh yeah.
destroy 6 months worth of work.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it could destroy more than that. And the funniest thing is I've had people tell me, "Hey, Greg, you don't play poker, do you?" And I go, "No." I go, "Everybody can read me like a book." I'm like, I can't. I'm like, I can't. My facial expressions will tell you exactly what I'm thinking or what. And the interesting thing is, I think some of my expressions are taken the wrong way,
Right.
which can also go a different way. So for me, I think that's the two, to me, those are the two top things.
Hmm.
I think the last thing is it as a chief officer, it really, I don't think I really prepared myself for the military side of it in regards to, hey, you're a chief, this is the way we need to act around you. It that to me, that was just a whole different thing. And I think that was another thing a mentor warned me about. He's like, look, there's going to be times when you're a chief officer in this role and you're going to walk into the room and it's going to get real quiet and it's going to be really awkward. And you're going to have to know, hey, this is probably not the right time for me to be here. I need to leave.
Right.
And that was another thing that I was like, no way, that I just can't. I'm like, that's just not the way I was wired. I don't know.
It's interesting because there's an idea organizationally that you have to be in community with the people you lead, but you can't need community from the people you lead. You have to find that community apart from them at times. And
Yeah.
it's similar to what you're saying, right? It's like, well, I need to have community that can hold me accountable, can encourage me, can do all those things, but it can't always be the people I lead. And yet I still have to stay connected to them to where when they want to be connected, we can. And, it does put you in a unique position because you're going, man, I'm in community for your sake, but then I'm taking responsibility for finding community for me somewhere else. And what I see is guys do one or the other. Either I'm
Right.
going to be everybody's buddy and they don't lead, or they
Right.
go, hey, you know what? Because I'm the chief, I can't connect with you, and then they miss
Right.
out. And
Right.
so I think finding that balance of going, hey, you know what? I'm in community for your sake, and man, I'm here and I'm genuinely a part of it. And yet I also have kind of the supplemental community, so I'm not trying to get all of what I need
Right.
from those that are following me.
I think the hard part is being connected with that community and still being able to hold them accountable.
Yeah, yeah,
Because there's times where you need to hold folks accountable and it's not going to come off as a good decision, but in your heart, in your mind, you did the right thing, you did it for the right cause, you did it for the right decision, but everybody else sees it differently. So it is truly a tough spot to be in, to try to constantly maintain that balance, because it's like I said, any moment you can say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, make the wrong gesture, or hold somebody accountable that they don't think that's the way you should have handled that issue.
right.
The other interesting piece is it's, and I think this is one of the reasons why they say it's lonely at the top, is because you can't always share everything that went through that thought process to make that decision, because you're not legally able to share some of that stuff with them. And I think that puts everybody in a tough spot.
Yeah, and so finding a couple people that you can confidentially share with in a way that doesn't violate that's critical. And
Right.
I think what happens is most of us get to that place and we just swallow it. We just go, well, I can't do it here, so I won't do it at all. Instead of going, no, like figure that out. One of the things I love about you guys, the chiefs that we work with, is you guys are a peer group to each other where you're not so closely connected that sharing is going to get you in trouble. But you could say, hey, I did this. This is why. What do you guys think? And you get somebody else respond back, well, I'm not sure that was the best decision, but it's not costing you something in your city of origin. It's just
Right.
it's a safe place to deal with that. So I
Yep.
think it's good.
Yep.
So how about as a chief, what are one or two of the best resources, programs that you've encountered, that you go, man, if today you get hired, you're the new chief of Denver's, South Metro Fire. What are one or two things you're like, we're absolutely going to do this or focus on this because I know it's so valuable?
I think one would be doing to me, one would be doing a community risk assessment.
Okay.
Because we need to understand, I don't care if you're from ops, if you're prevention, whatever you are, you have to understand the risk in your community to be able to understand how are you going to address that.
Yeah.
I do not understand why more elected officials do not require departments or chiefs or agencies to go through that. I think the other thing is going through a standard of cover operationally and looking at that as a holistic approach. Because I think what that does is it gives you an opportunity to reflect on what you're doing as a service and what you're doing as a business to see if you want to provide or how we can provide better service to our customers with the existing resources we have.
Okay.
Or
Awesome.
it's going to show your elected officials that need for additional resources if they want to provide this level of service. I think that's the key as being a chief or a leader. You have to be able to let the community and the elected officials decide what level of service is that they're willing to pay for. Some's willing to
I
pay.
love that, right? Where you're going, this amount of money gets you this level of service,
Yep.
so that it doesn't feel just kind of like reached out of the air. Well, I need 3 more
Yep.
trucks, to
Yep.
go like, hey, if you want this is what it costs. If you want this is
Yep.
what it costs. That kind of neutrality and presenting some of that, I think, can be really powerful.
Right. And I think it's done through, and all of that originated and started through CPSE through the accreditation process.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more. I think there's a lot of the agencies out there that they're like, yeah, that's cool. I don't want to do that because I really don't want to know the truth. And there's some out there that's like, hey, I can't afford to go through the accreditation process. And it's like, well, wait a minute, you don't have to go through the accreditation process. But if you do a couple of these key components,
Right.
you could have the same opportunities that accredited departments do. So
Right.
I think that's the other thing is if I came into a new organization, I would look at it in a way of, hey, do we want to become accredited? Do we not? I think the other piece with accreditation, and I think the other piece with the standard of cover and community risk assessment is that realistically, like the accreditation process, there's a peer review team that comes and looks at your agency and looks over your agency and then does all of that. I think that's a critical step. I think if you're not going to go through the accreditation process, it behooves an organization to go through that process, but do it independently with a third party so that way they can give you their recommendations and it's not your recommendations.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because there's a question that I've asked in the past, and we were talking about it before we got on the call. Are there any lies in the fire service that you notice? But I think what's interesting organizationally, fire service or otherwise, when you bring somebody else in from the outside, they're real honest with you, and they won't put up with, well, this is how it is, and so like it's easy for me in a marriage, right? You get married and you have kids, that family of origin's real honest with you. So when you're like, man, I'm looking great, they're like, nah, you put on
Yep.
50 pounds, or you need to comb your hair, like, and having someone from outside come in who's not going to play the game and who's not going to go, yeah, 7.5 minutes to get to a call is fine. And somebody else is like, hey, wow, that's way too long. We
Right.
can't have 7.5 minutes.
Right.
And so I think that peer review stuff, and I love what you're doing is you're making space like, hey, do it in accreditation or do it outside of accreditation. It doesn't matter. Just get someone who will tell you the truth. Not
Yep.
someone who you think is going to make you feel good, but
Yep.
someone who respects you and honors you and is going to tell you the truth. Let them tell you, man, in my experience, those have been the greatest moments of growth where I didn't always like what I heard, but all of a sudden is like, yeah, we do need to tackle that.
Well, correct. And I think also a lot of times as fire chiefs and deputy chiefs, we're a little bit, we don't want to tell our elected officials what we can't do
Right.
and what we're bad at. We want to tell them what we're really good at.
Yeah.
And I think this allows someone to come in and share that information and it not be specifically coming from you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and how cool would it be, as a chief to be able to go to your elected officials and say, hey, we wanted to get better. We brought in a peer review team. Here's 3 things that we realized we need to do. Here's what we've already done. And here's what we intend to do to make it better. Like if
Yep.
I'm an elected official, man, I'm going, yes, like that's what I
Yep.
want from you. There'd
Yep.
be no shame. There'd be no, now I know some people may, go, hey, that's the opportunity they're looking for. But my thing is lead well. Don't worry about all that other nonsense. So let me ask you two last things. One, is somebody is a new firefighter, they're an engineer, and they're like, hey, my intention is to join the command staff at some point to be able to contribute. What would you say? Here's 3 or 4 things to do to prepare so that when you get there, you're ready.
Number one, start going to the National Fire Academy.
Okay.
Start going to the National Fire Academy and taking those classes, and start developing your network from those classes.
Yeah.
The network of people that you will get to know through the National Fire Academy and everything that's going on there will be invaluable for the rest of your career. You won't understand how valuable it will be. And it's honestly, you will never understand the relationships that you develop and build through there. There are people that I've gotten to know from years and years and years that I still stay connected with,
Yeah.
and value. The second piece I will honestly share with you is probably one of the things that you need to be prepared to look at, view at today is, don't do anything stupid.
Yeah.
Because it'll stay with you the rest of your career, and that's what you'll be known for.
Yeah.
It's treated as this is a profession, and you need to make sure you maintain that professional capability. It doesn't matter if it's after hours activities. It doesn't matter if you're with your folks. It's one of the things a mentor said to me once is when I was coming to Spokane Valley is, hey, this is a clean start for you because people don't know you there, so they don't know your past. And they can't evaluate you based upon that.
Yeah.
Not that it was a bad thing or a good thing, but I've seen that people get a fresh start when they get an opportunity to go to another organization like that. There's a lot of times where kids, young folks within the organization, they will probably never get that opportunity. So people are making judgment calls based upon something that you did 15 or 20 years ago, and you're trying to test for battalion chief now.
Well, and when you say that, it causes me to think of like deal with your demons, because eventually they'll come out. Like you either deal with them now, and then and I think being a Christian, there's a phrase that was in the Bible said a prophet's not welcome in his own hometown, and it's because they all remember, right? And
Yep.
so like if you're going to be raised in an organization,
Yep.
like deal with your crap, take the time to work on wellness. You know what I mean? I think what happens when a lot of our younger officers, both fire and law enforcement, is they don't do well with coping. And so it's, hey, you know what? I'm going to drink my way through this season, or I'm going to, I'm going to relationship my way through this season with 4 or 5 different people, or,
Yep.
I'm going to do it. And the truth is you're going to deal with it eventually. It'll
Yep.
either have compound interest, so the debt's going to be high, or you can deal with it now. And to just go, hey, your coping mechanisms now will follow you. And so when you're early on, what I would say is, man, pick really good coping mechanisms and ask other people who are ahead of you, hey, I'm not doing well with this. I don't sleep well. And my solution is to go home and have a drink,
Right.
like deal with that now.
Right.
And then you won't have to worry about it, later on.
Right. And I think the other thing is for young officers, don't think you have to be perfect. We're all humans. We all make mistakes, but it's when it's this vicious cycle of wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. It's like, okay, I know their character at this point. I know where to put them in the spectrum. I know where they're going to be. But then all of a sudden you could have an epiphany in your life and things could change and you could change, and all of that happens. That's all they're going to reflect on. They're not going to reflect on the new you. They can't see the new you.
Right. Right.
And I think that's the hard piece. So I think that's one of the pieces that as a new recruit or a new firefighter, you have to be aware of. The interesting thing is, the other thing I always talk to our recruits about was the most valuable, influential and most used tool that you'll have in your tool belt is the sticker badge that we walk around with. And I tell them, I said, you remember when you were a kid at 6 or 7 and you got a sticker badge from some individual with the fire department walking through what fire department, police department, I don't, you name it,
Right.
sheriff's department, I don't care. You give that little kid a sticker badge, they light up
I've
like,
been stunned
yeah,
by the way kids respond. I mean, we'll be on a call. I'll be out with these officers. We'll be on a call, and we'll have kids come up, and they'll wait, and they're sitting on the side, and finally we give them our attention. We're like, yeah, I need a sticker. Can one of you guys go
yep.
give me a sticker?
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've literally seen an officer hand a sticker, and that little kid looked like you had just given him $10,000
Oh, yeah.
and clapped to their chest, and they're
Oh,
running
yeah.
around, and they're like, "Oh man!" And the whole time I'm over here thinking it's a sticker. But
Yep.
for them it wasn't. It meant
Yep.
something.
Oh, yeah. And huge, huge
Yeah.
means volumes. But I also share with our recruits is I said, listen, you have to be able to understand the impact that you're making is not just on that one individual child.
Right.
I says, as you lean down and you give that sticker to that child, I said, it's the mom, the dad, the grandparents, the whoever's standing there with the kid is watching you do this. And I said, I want you to, look up, look at them, because I said, they're smiling just as big as the kid's smiling, because I said, they're happy because their kid's happy. And I said, I said, literally, it's going to be more powerful than your chainsaw. So I tell them, I said, anybody that ever worked for me had to have a pocket full of badges.
Yep.
And I said, anybody that does work for me today, you could ask them, hey, and they could whip one out.
The badges, the other thing that cracked me up, so we were on a call the other day, we gave out all these badges, and they're asking, I need one for my friend, and so we're like, giving extra. And then when we drove by, both of the officers, the two cars that we were in, both turned on their lights and sirens for them for like 2 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
Little kid, you just thought they had their own parade. They were just like, this is amazing. Now, we did pull one little kid out of the car who decided he was going to crawl in and see what everything was about. And we were like, no, you can't get in the car.
Right. Yep.
So let's finish this way, Greg. I want to give you a couple minutes. We've got about 3 minutes left. Anything you want to say? Anything you want to say about fire service, about life, I just want to give you space. You're talking to, you're going to have people in the fire service listening. You're going to have people from business listening. You're going to have family, friends. You're going to have people that have never met you. Just take a couple minutes as we close and just what do you want to say to the world?
Well, I think one of the things I would want to say just to anybody listening, if you're not in the fire service world, I think one of the things that I've learned over my 28, year stint in the service and hopefully continue somewhere, is if there's one thing that I can suggest to you is when you meet somebody in the fire service, don't ask them what is the worst thing you've ever seen. What is the worst? I think people don't realize what you're doing mentally to individuals that work. And I want to go beyond fire service, go law enforcement, EMS, go to military. I mean, anything.
Yeah. What's a better question? Because I run into that a lot. People going, don't ask me what my worst day was. I don't want to relive it. What's a better question for someone who's like, hey, I want to talk about your job because I want to give you space for that. What's a question they can ask?
To me, I want to know what is the best experience you've ever had? What is one thing that sticks out in your head that is just like, dude, this was one of the best things that ever happened?
Yeah.
And I think you'll get answers from, hey, we responded to somebody on a cardiac arrest and they were up and awake and all of this by the time we got to the hospital. And from, being able to deliver a baby to being able to do, who knows what. To me, I think that's a different way, because I think we want to know, but it's human nature for us. And you see it when there's a car wreck on the side of the road. Everybody has to slow down because we want to see it. Right. That's what we watch NASCAR for. We want to see the big wreck. I think that's what we live for. And I think that's what we want to hear from a firefighter or somebody in emergency response with the police department, and the thing about it is asking a firefighter, what was your worst call, would be like asking a police officer, hey, have you ever shot anybody?
Right. right?
It's like, holy cow. It's like, we think it might not be that big of an issue to ask that question, but you have no idea what the mental toll of that
Yeah.
individual is.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is you have to think about, if somebody lost a spouse, you wouldn't go up and ask them a question like that about their spouse.
Right.
You would be a little bit more aware of it. And I think that's one of the things, to me, that's if I could share anything with people, that's the one thing I would share with people,
Yeah.
is ask them what has been the best call they've ever gone on. What's
Yeah.
been the best experience? Because the thing about it is I think you're going to see it more from a passionate person versus a person that is trying to deal with mental issues and torture and try to explain to you something that they don't even talk to their family about.
Well, the other thing I've noticed with cops specifically is, to ask them, hey, what's most important to you in life? It helps make them more than just a police officer, more than just a firefighter. And I think sometimes we just shove them in a box and we're
Yep.
like, oh, that's what you
Yep.
are. And to go, hey, what's something you haven't done in life yet that you hope to?
Right.
Those type questions. But I love that reminder, like, hey, when you
Ask,
ask that question, the amount of
yeah.
trauma that you're stirring in a person,
Yep.
and so just don't ask it. And I think you're really wise in saying there is a part of a human nature. It's like, oh, tell me about it. And that's looking out the window and go, hey, you, and I tell people this all the time, don't look out the window because you can't unsee what you just saw. So, you may look out of curiosity, but now that's a part of your life. Now you have to, whatever you see, you can't get out of there. And so we tell people all the time, be very careful what you look at. And I'll tell officers on the scene, we'll get called in for suicides and stuff. And they'll say, hey, you want to go back and see? And I'm like, do you need me back there? No. I'm like, then I'm not going back there. They're like, why not? I was like, because I can serve you better if I don't have that baggage.
Right.
I was like,
Yep.
I'll carry the baggage if I need to, but I'm not going there unless I need to, because
Right.
there's more of me left for you. And they're like, oh, and I tell them the same thing. If you don't need to go back there, you shouldn't go back there either. And on your phone, scrolling and looking at, show me the pictures from that scene. Man, I only see what I got to see.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the other thing would be is ask them, ask them why they got in that field.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I mean, and the thing about it is to me, I like to ask anybody that. I talked about the chef earlier. I'd love to know why the chef got into, well, why'd you get into this?
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, that and the thing about it is I like to talk to people about that, because to me it helps me with that relationship piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you tell me why you got into a certain field or why you're passionate about it, it gives me a little snapshot of who you are.
Yeah. Well, there's a connection, right? Because now you can
Exactly.
connect to that
Yep.
and go,
Yep.
yes, man, I totally
Yeah.
value that as well.
The other piece is if I can start to find out why you got into the fire service or why it gives me a different opportunity to be a leader for you in a different way, because now I can feed your passion.
Ooh, I like that. I love that idea of like, now I can serve you. That's super.
Yep.
Hi, Greg. Hey, thanks for the call. This is awesome. I'm going to cut this up into a couple different segments, and then I'll put it on LinkedIn and Facebook. Share it with you. You'll maybe be attached to it so you can share it. But thank you for the time, man. I love your wisdom, your humility. I am so stoked to see what happens next for you, because I know you're not done. I mean, I know, like I know how.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what's coming next. So.
Right? What I always love is the people that say that are not the ones it's happening to. But anyway, love you, love your influence and your impact so far, and think it's going to continue to grow. So thanks for the time together, bud.
Absolutely appreciate it.
All right, take care, man.
Uh-huh.